Welcome back, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button because you're in for one heck of a story. Today's tale is one that'll have you on the edge of your seat, and it all starts in the bustling streets of Chicago. The skyline, the fast pace, the unrelenting hustle. It's a city that never sleeps, and neither does the drama. Before we dive into this roller coaster, we'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment below. Now let's get into the heart of the story. It was the fall of 2023, and Marcus Holloway had just made partner at his law firm. At 38, he was a rising star in the legal world, known for his sharp mind and even sharper suits. His reputation for winning high-stakes cases had earned him the respect of his colleagues. But his real pride came from the life he had built outside of work. His wife, Emily, was the perfect complement to his success. Together, they were the golden couple, the ones who everyone looked at with envy. They had the house, the cars, the vacations. Everything looked perfect on the outside. But if you peeled back the shiny veneer, you'd see something different. Beneath the picture-perfect exterior, cracks were starting to show, and those cracks were getting wider every day. Marcus had met Emily when they were both in law school. She had been the smart, ambitious student who had a quiet confidence about her. She was the kind of woman who didn't need to make a scene to get attention, but she still did. Her beauty, combined with her intelligence, made her unforgettable. Marcus had fallen hard and fast, and when they married just 3 years later, it felt like the beginning of a beautiful love story. They were both professionals, both busy, but they understood each other in a way that made them feel like soulmates. But over the last year, something had changed. It wasn't sudden, but it was noticeable. Emily had started coming home later and later, her once familiar voice over the phone now full of excuses. "I'm just finishing up with a client," she'd say. "I'm running late with a meeting." At first, Marcus had brushed it off. She was working hard, and he respected that. She was doing what she had to do to climb the corporate ladder at the marketing firm where she worked. But as the months passed, those excuses became more frequent, and the late nights became more regular. And then there was the shift in her behavior. She was distant, distracted. It was subtle at first, but over time, Marcus couldn't ignore it. Enter Rachel, the woman who would unknowingly change everything. Rachel was Emily's best friend, and she had been a constant in their lives since the beginning. She had always been the bubbly one in their circle of friends, full of life, laughter, and always a little too much wine at parties. But Rachel's friendship with Marcus had always been just that, friendship. They had shared countless evenings at dinner parties, laughing over shared jokes and harmless flirtations. Nothing too serious, just friendly banter. Marcus had always trusted Rachel. After all, she was his wife's best friend. He thought of her like family. But things took a turn the night of Marcus's big promotion party. It was a Friday night, and the celebration was in full swing. The law firm had rented out a trendy rooftop bar in downtown Chicago, overlooking the city. The atmosphere was electric, everyone congratulating Marcus, showering him with praise for his hard work. It should have been the perfect night, but as Marcus glanced around the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Emily had arrived late, just like she always did. She was wearing a dress that Marcus had never seen before. Stunning, glamorous, and just a bit too much for a casual office party. He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. She kissed him on the cheek when she walked in, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Rachel, ever the social butterfly, was by Emily's side almost immediately, pulling her into a conversation with a group of people Marcus didn't know. It was the way Rachel looked at him as she passed, though, that caught his attention. It wasn't the playful, joking look she always gave him. No, this was something else. It was loaded with meaning, as if there was some unspoken message in her gaze. As the night wore on, Marcus couldn't help but notice the strange interactions between Emily and Rachel. They whispered to each other in the corners of the room, occasionally glancing over at him. He tried to brush it off, thinking he was just being paranoid. After all, they were friends, right? But deep down, something was gnawing at him. Then came the moment that would change everything. Around 11 p.m., as the night began to wind down, Marcus found himself standing at the bar, nursing his drink. when Rachel approached him. She was a little tipsy, her face flushed from the wine, but there was something different in her eyes tonight, a glimmer of mischief. "Marcus?" she said, her voice lowered, as though sharing some secret. "I have to admit something." Marcus raised an eyebrow, confused. "What's that?" Rachel leaned in closer, just enough so only he could hear. "I think Emily is hiding something from you," she said with a knowing look. "I think you should pay attention." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He took a step back, trying to make sense of what she just said. Rachel smiled slyly, and before he could ask her what she meant, she was gone, lost in the crowd. His mind raced. Was she just drunk and trying to mess with him? Or was she trying to tell him something real? That night, after the party, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emily had barely said 2 words to him on the drive home, her eyes fixed on her phone, sending text messages, doing God knows what. When they got home, she kissed him goodnight, but it was a quick, distracted kiss, the kind you give someone when you're not really present. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the space where his wife used to be, thinking back to Rachel's words. "Something is off," he muttered under his breath. This is where the story truly begins. All right, folks, here we go. If you're still hanging on, we're about to dive deep into the twists and turns of this story. So, grab a snack, hit that like button, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more intense stories like this one. Your thoughts in the comments are always welcome. We love hearing from you. Now, let's pick up where we left off. Marcus was left reeling from Rachel's cryptic warning, and things were only going to get messier from here. The next few days felt like a blur to Marcus. The morning after the party, Emily was the picture of normalcy. She was polite, even affectionate, but there was something about her energy or lack thereof that bothered him. She was distant, and no matter how hard he tried to connect with her, the usual spark was missing. Rachel's words echoed in his mind, gnawing at him. "I think Emily is hiding something from you." What was it? And why was Rachel the one to point it out? The more Marcus thought about it, the more the little inconsistencies in Emily's behavior began to stand out. The late nights at work, the unexplained phone calls, her frequent disappearances into the bathroom when she thought he wasn't looking. He wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but something wasn't adding up. The tension started to build. Marcus could feel it between them. Their once easygoing mornings were now filled with forced conversation. He'd ask about her day, and she'd give short, polite answers. When he mentioned his upcoming business trip to New York, she didn't seem the slightest bit interested, and that was unusual. Emily had always been the type to cheer him on in his career, reminding him to pack his favorite cologne or asking if he needed anything before he left. But not this time. And then, there was the fact that Rachel kept showing up. She'd been a constant presence in Marcus's life, a good friend, someone who knew the ins and outs of his relationship with Emily. But lately, Rachel's visits had become more frequent. It was as if she was inserting herself into their home, casually dropping by for coffee or to catch up. Marcus never thought much of it before, but now, with everything that was going on, it seemed off. The way she looked at him sometimes, the way she lingered just a little too long. Could she be involved in something more than just friendship? The situation reached a breaking point one night when Marcus returned early from work. His law firm had just wrapped up a major case, and he decided to surprise Emily with a quiet dinner at home. He was hoping to reconnect, to talk about their plans for the future, maybe take a weekend trip, something to get them back on track. He grabbed a bottle of wine on his way home, but when he entered the house, what he saw took him completely by surprise. There, sitting on the couch in their living room, were Emily and Rachel. But what really made Marcus's heart drop was the way they were sitting. Rachel was practically leaning into Emily, her hand resting on her knee, their heads close together as they whispered and giggled like teenagers. The scene felt intimate, too intimate. Marcus froze in the doorway, the bottle of wine dangling loosely from his hand. When Emily looked up and saw him, her face quickly masked any emotion, but Marcus noticed the brief flicker of panic in her eyes. "Marcus," Emily said, trying to sound casual. "You're home early. We were just talking about some things. Rachel, ever the quick thinker, jumped in. Yeah, we were just discussing some of the work stuff, you know? Helping Emily with some ideas. Marcus felt his heart sink. Work stuff? Was that really the excuse? It felt like a cover-up, and he couldn't help but notice the way Rachel's eyes flickered away from him. That wasn't the way a best friend behaved. He tried to keep his voice steady. You two are close, huh? Rachel shot him a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You know we are. Emily's my best friend. Emily stood up, her hands smoothing down her skirt. It's been a long day, Marcus. We were just blowing off some steam. She turned to Rachel, her smile now a little too forced. Rachel, I think it's time to head out. Marcus and I need to talk. As Rachel got up to leave, she flashed Marcus one last glance, her smile just a little too knowing. See you later, Marcus, she said, her tone just a little too sweet, a little too suggestive. And that was it. The moment that had been building for weeks, no months, had finally come crashing down. Marcus stood there in the quiet of their living room, the weight of the situation sinking in. Something was going on, and he was going to find out exactly what it was. The next few days were a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty. Marcus decided to take matters into his own hands. He wasn't the type to sit back and let things unfold passively. If something was wrong, he was going to get to the bottom of it. He started small, snooping through Emily's things when she wasn't around. He knew he shouldn't, but at that point he didn't care. It wasn't like he was looking for some big revelation. Just a clue. Something to explain what had been happening to their relationship. But all he found were random receipts, a few empty bottles of wine, and her old journal. Nothing that screamed betrayal. But that nagging feeling remained. Then came the phone call. It was late one evening when Marcus received a text from Rachel, just a casual message asking if he'd seen Emily's work emails lately. His stomach twisted. Rachel had no business texting him, especially not about Emily's work. He opened the message, the words staring back at him like a warning. I think you should know that Emily's been spending a lot of time with someone else. Someone you wouldn't expect. The message hit him like a punch in the gut. He knew what Rachel was implying, but he needed to hear more. He needed to know who it was. He dialed Rachel's number, his hands trembling. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up, her voice cheerful but with an undertone that Marcus didn't trust. Marcus, she said. What's going on? Why the late-night call? I need you to tell me what you meant by that text, Marcus said, his voice low, controlled. Who is Emily seeing? And why are you telling me this? Rachel hesitated, a long pause stretching out between them. Marcus, it's not what you think, she finally said. But it's about time you knew. She's been meeting someone for months now. Someone who's been getting closer to her. Much closer. Marcus's heart dropped. Who? His mind was racing, trying to piece together any hint of this someone she was referring to. I can't say more right now, Rachel continued. But I'll give you enough to start looking. Just remember, you've been too busy with work to notice. You've been blind to what's been right under your nose. Before Marcus could ask another question, she hung up. He was left standing there, feeling like the ground beneath him had just vanished. Folks, buckle up. The twists in this story are about to get wild. Marcus has the clues now, and he's determined to get answers. No more games, no more secrets. All right, folks, things are heating up, and I mean really heating up. Marcus is on the warpath now, and we're diving into some of the most intense moments of this story. The tension is rising, and the stakes couldn't be higher. So, make sure you're comfy, hit that like button, and let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. You don't want to miss the twists we've got coming. Let's dive in. It was the next day that Marcus decided to confront Emily. There was no more dancing around it. He had the information, or at least part of it. Rachel's cryptic message and the odd behavior he had been witnessing couldn't be ignored any longer. Emily had just finished a call in her office when Marcus walked in. His jaw set, his mind made up. She looked up, a faint smile on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Marcus, she said, voice soft but strained. I didn't expect you to be home so soon. Everything okay? He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We need to talk, Emily. Now." She blinked, surprise flashing across her face, but she didn't argue. Instead, she gestured toward the couch, her body language defensive. "What's going on? What's this about?" Marcus sat down across from her, his eyes never leaving hers. He felt like he was on the edge of a cliff, knowing that what he was about to say would change everything. "It's about Rachel, and it's about what you've been hiding from me." Emily stiffened, her lips pressing into a tight line. "Rachel?" she repeated, her voice faltering. "What are you talking about?" He leaned forward, voice low but unwavering. "I know what's going on, Emily. I know you've been seeing someone else. And I know Rachel's involved." Her face drained of color. For a moment, Marcus thought she might try to lie her way out of it. But then the mask cracked. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Her silence spoke volumes. "Emily," Marcus said again, quieter now, "I need you to tell me the truth. Who is it?" She swallowed hard, her hand trembling as it rested on the arm of the couch. "It's complicated, Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Complicated," he scoffed, his anger now rising. "You've been lying to me for months, and now you're telling me it's complicated?" Emily's eyes welled up with tears. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way, Marcus. I never meant for it to go this far." The words hit him like a slap in the face. He felt the betrayal deep in his gut, but he kept his composure. "Who is it, Emily?" She hesitated, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might not tell him. But then she spoke. It's Rachel." The words hung in the air, suffocating the room. Marcus sat back, the reality of what she'd just said sinking in. His mind raced. Rachel, his best friend, his wife's best friend, the person he'd trusted more than anyone. "I didn't plan it," Emily continued, her voice cracking. "It just happened, and I didn't know how to stop it." Marcus's vision blurred for a second as everything he thought he knew came crashing down. "You didn't know how to stop it?" he repeated, his voice rising. "You didn't know how to stop an affair with my best friend?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face now.
I'm sorry, Marcus.
"I never wanted to hurt you, but I don't know what happened. Started as a friendship and then it became something else. Something I couldn't control." The words cut through Marcus, but they weren't enough to stop him. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was physical, and it was with the one person who had been a constant in his life. The woman who had always been there, cheering him on, supporting his every decision, now stood as the architect of his heartbreak. This was it. Marcus had reached the moment where everything would change. He could feel the shift in the air. The weight of the situation pressed down on him, but he wasn't about to let it destroy him. He had a choice. He could react with anger or he could take control. "I can't believe this," Marcus said, standing up and pacing the room. "How could you do this? How could you betray me with Rachel?" Emily stood up too, trying to close the distance between them. "Marcus, please, just let me explain." "No." He cut her off, his voice sharp. "I don't want explanations. I want truth. And I want you to understand that this—" He gestured between them, his hands shaking. "This is over." Emily took a step back, as though he'd slapped her. "Marcus, please. I don't know what else to say. I love you, but I love Rachel too." The confession hung in the air, the weight of it suffocating Marcus. He felt like he couldn't breathe, like everything he'd worked for, everything he believed in, was slipping through his fingers. Now let's pause here for a moment. This is where the story really begins to pick up speed, folks. Marcus is on the edge, and the conflict between him, Emily, and Rachel is about to get more intense. But what happens next? How does Marcus decide to deal with the truth of his wife's betrayal? Stay tuned, because the next part is going to be full of twists and turns you won't see coming. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a minute of this emotional roller coaster. Let's keep this story going. The drama is only getting started. Alright folks, this is where things are really starting to boil over. Marcus has just learned the truth about Emily and Rachel's betrayal, and as you can imagine, The tension is palpable. The stakes are higher than ever, and everything Marcus thought he knew about his marriage, his friendships, and his life is now up for grabs. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss the twists that are coming next. So grab a seat, hit that like button, and let's dive back in. Marcus stood in the middle of the living room, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind was a storm of emotions. Betrayal, anger, confusion, all of it crashing together, making it nearly impossible to think clearly. He had asked for the truth, but hearing it was an entirely different matter. Emily was standing in front of him now, her eyes red from the tears that wouldn't stop falling. She reached out, her voice trembling. Marcus, please don't do this. You have to understand. It's not what you think. Not what I think. Marcus wanted to scream, but he didn't. He took a deep breath, his hands still shaking from the anger bubbling up inside him. I don't think I can understand this, Emily, he said, his voice quieter but still firm. I've trusted you. I've built everything with you. And now I find out that all of it was built on lies. She stepped forward, her hands outstretched. Marcus, please. I never meant for it to go this far. I love you, I really do. But this happened and I couldn't stop it. He felt his chest tighten as he struggled to control his emotions. He was furious, but beneath that anger was a deep, aching hurt. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had built a life together, a future. But now, everything he thought they were was crumbling, and Emily was standing here, offering weak apologies that couldn't undo the damage. Stop! Marcus held up a hand. I don't need your excuses. What you've done. It's unforgivable. Her face crumpled as she let out a sob, but Marcus could see it clearly now. The desperation in her eyes, the knowledge that she had lost him. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. It was about the destruction of everything they had worked for, everything they had built together. I'm so sorry, Marcus, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. Marcus shook his head. You did, Emily. You did the second you decided to sleep with Rachel. The words were out, and once they were spoken, there was no taking them back. Emily fell back onto the couch, her hands clutching her face in anguish. Please, I never wanted this to happen. I don't know what to do. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He was numb, the sting of the betrayal cutting deeper with every word. He turned away, pacing toward the window, staring out at the city below. The bright lights of Chicago, his city, the city where he had made a name for himself, seemed so far away, almost like a dream he could no longer touch. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and when he checked it, his stomach dropped. It was a message from Rachel. We need to talk. I don't want to lose you, Marcus. Rachel, after everything, after the role she played in this, the audacity of it was almost too much to handle. The next few hours were a blur. After Marcus confronted Emily, the house felt suffocating. There were no more words to say, no more apologies to hear. He couldn't look at her anymore, not without feeling like he was choking on the lies. He made a decision. He needed to see Rachel. He needed answers. As he drove to Rachel's apartment, his mind was racing. What had she been thinking? Why would she betray him like this? It didn't make sense. He trusted Rachel. He thought of her as a friend. No, more than that, a sister. And here she was, conspiring with Emily to destroy his marriage. By the time he arrived at her apartment, the tension had reached a fever pitch. He was angry, and the only thing keeping him from exploding was the cold, hard certainty that he needed closure. He needed to understand how and why. Rachel's apartment was quiet when he arrived. The door cracked open as if she had been expecting him. He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the room. She was sitting on the couch, her legs curled underneath her, her face a mix of guilt and apprehension. Rachel. Marcus's voice was low, controlled, but the anger was still simmering just beneath the surface. What the hell is going on? You were supposed to be my friend. Rachel didn't speak at first, her eyes fixed on the floor. She swallowed hard before meeting his gaze. I never meant for this to happen, Marcus. I never wanted to hurt you. Stop saying that. His voice cracked as the words left his mouth. You've been lying to me, manipulating me, using me as a pawn in your sick little game. Rachel flinched at his words, but she didn't deny them. I'm sorry, okay? I never thought I'd fall for Emily. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Marcus's eyes burned with the weight of everything he was feeling. Did you really think you could keep this from me forever? Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know. I thought I could just keep it hidden. I thought it was just an affair. But it wasn't. It turned into something more, and I couldn't stop it. Marcus shook his head, his mind struggling to process her words. How could she do this to him? How could the person he trusted most in the world betray him like this? The shock was slowly giving way to a cold, seething rage, but beneath that anger, there was a sense of betrayal that ran deeper than anything he had ever felt. I can't believe this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't believe you, Rachel. The silence between them stretched on, neither of them willing to speak. For the first time in their friendship, Marcus didn't know if they could go back to what they were. He didn't know if he could ever trust her again. What are we going to do now? Rachel asked, her voice barely audible. I can't lose you, Marcus. I care about you more than you know. The words hung in the air, and Marcus didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His thoughts were too tangled, too jumbled. What was left to say? What was left to fix? And just like that, the story reached a pivotal moment. Marcus had finally confronted both women in his life. His wife, his best friend, both of them, had betrayed him, and now he was forced to decide what he was going to do with that knowledge. Was there a chance to salvage something? Or was this the end? The stakes had never been higher. The tension is building, folks. Marcus is facing a choice that could alter the course of his life forever. What will he do? How will he handle this betrayal, this heartache? Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more intense. Make sure to like, share, and comment below. We're all in this together. Let's keep the discussion going, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a minute of what's coming next. All right, let's dive back into this intense roller coaster of emotions. Marcus is standing at a crossroads now. The truth about Emily and Rachel's betrayal is out, and everything is about to go down. The stakes couldn't be higher, and every moment counts. Let's get into the next part of the story. The next morning, Marcus didn't know what to do with himself. The confrontation with Emily and Rachel had left him feeling hollow, but strangely, it also gave him a sense of clarity. For the first time in months, he could see the situation for what it truly was. A betrayal of trust, a web of lies, and the end of everything he had thought was real. But the more he thought about it, the more determined he became. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. This was about reclaiming his life, his career, his future. He was done being the victim. He picked up the phone and dialed Rachel's number. The call rang 3 times before she picked up. Her voice was soft, but Marcus could hear the anxiety in her tone. Marcus, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. What's going on? We need to meet, he said, his voice steady but cold. I need to see you, face to face. Rachel hesitated, the silence on the other end almost deafening. Okay, where? The old cafe on Oak Street, Marcus replied, his mind already racing. We'll talk there. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat at a corner table in the dimly lit cafe. The weight of the situation hung over him like a dark cloud, but he refused to let it control him. He had a plan now. He wasn't going to let Rachel or Emily dictate the narrative anymore. This time, he would take the reins. As he waited for Rachel, his fingers drummed nervously against the wooden table. He could hear snippets of conversations around him, the clink of coffee cups and the low hum of jazz music in the background. But it all seemed so distant, so far away from what was happening in his own life. Minutes later, the door to the cafe opened, and Rachel walked in, looking nervous but determined. She spotted Marcus right away, and despite the tension in the air, she gave him a small, almost sad smile before walking over to the table. Hey, she said, sitting down across from him. You wanted to talk? Marcus didn't waste any time. Yes, I need to know everything, Rachel. Everything you've been hiding, everything you've been a part of. She swallowed hard, glancing around the cafe before lowering her voice. I didn't want it to get this far, Marcus. But it's too late now, isn't it? Marcus leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. It is too late, Rachel. You knew what you were doing. You knew how far you were willing to go. But what I don't understand is why. Why did you do it? Why with Emily? Rachel looked away, her fingers playing with the edge of her coffee cup. I don't know. Started out so innocent. Just a few shared moments, a little more time spent together, and then it turned into something else. I didn't mean to hurt you, Marcus. I really didn't. Her voice broke at the last words, and for a split second, Marcus almost felt pity for her. Almost. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I wouldn't see what was going on? His voice was low, controlled, but there was a simmering anger just beneath the surface. He wasn't going to let her off easy. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak right away. I didn't want to hurt you. You're my best friend. But I've fallen in love with Emily, and I can't walk away from that. Marcus's hands tightened into fists. Fallen in love with Emily. The words echoed in his mind. He had built everything with this woman, his wife, his confidant, the woman he thought he knew. And now this. He leaned back in his chair, taking a slow, deliberate breath. This isn't just about an affair anymore, Rachel. You've crossed a line. And I'm not going to let this destroy everything I've worked for. Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but Marcus held up a hand, cutting her off. You don't get to control the narrative anymore, Rachel. You don't get to keep playing both sides. I trusted you both, and you've destroyed that trust. His voice wavered only for a second, but the emotion he felt was raw. Rachel looked down, her hands shaking. What do you want from me, Marcus? What can I possibly say to make this better? The question hung in the air like a weight, and Marcus knew there was no answer. There was nothing she could say. Not anymore. I want you to leave Emily, Marcus said, his words sharp and final. I want you to walk away from her. For good. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone knows about your betrayal. I'll make sure your business, your reputation, everything you've worked for, is destroyed. Rachel's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. Marcus, you can't do that. You can't destroy everything. I can and I will, he said coldly, standing up from the table. You've both made your choices. Now I'm making mine. As Marcus walked out of the cafe, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't just going to walk away from this. He wasn't going to let them get away with it. He would burn this all to the ground if that's what it took. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his lawyer. Clifford. It's time. Start the process. I need everything, assets, the offshore accounts, the proof of everything. Let's make them pay. As he stepped into his car, he could already feel the weight of his decision settle on him. This wasn't just a personal matter anymore. This was about business. This was about power. And he would make sure that, when this was all over, he was the one standing tall. Later that night, Marcus stood in front of his office window. The Chicago skyline spread out before him like a sprawling web of lights. He could hear the faint hum of the city beneath him, the sound of traffic and life moving below. But all he could think about was the mess he had gotten himself into, the consequences of his actions. As he turned back to his desk, his phone buzzed again. This time it was from Emily. I need to see you. Can we talk? Marcus stared at the message for a moment. The confrontation was inevitable, the final showdown between them, and this time he would not be the one on the defensive. The tension is building, folks. Marcus is stepping into uncharted territory now, and things are about to get even more intense. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this explosive story. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying the ride, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. You won't want to miss how this all unfolds. Alright, we are on the home stretch and the tension is at an all-time high. Marcus is about to face the most crucial part of his journey, and the final confrontation is coming. If you're still with me, get comfortable because this next part is packed with twists, revelations, and emotions you won't want to miss. Let's jump right into it. The next day, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at his phone. The message from Emily had been left unanswered for hours. He knew this conversation was inevitable, but he had no idea what he was going to say. Could anything really fix the shattered trust between them? His mind kept racing back to the cafe meeting with Rachel. She had no idea what he was planning. Neither of them did. The past few days had felt like a game of chess. Only this time, the stakes were much higher. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. This was about power, control, and how far Marcus was willing to go to reclaim what was his. He checked his watch. Emily's meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the condo. He had been preparing for this moment, rehearsing what he would say, what he would do. But as the hours ticked by, the tension only built. It was 5:55 p.m. when Marcus arrived at the condo. He walked up the steps, each step feeling heavier than the last. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder that this was it. The final confrontation. His hands felt clammy as he opened the door, stepping inside. The apartment was eerily quiet. He could hear the faint sound of jazz music playing in the background, a far cry from the tension he was about to face. Emily was sitting on the couch, looking more fragile than Marcus had ever seen her. Her eyes were red from crying, her face pale. The sight of her, this woman he once knew so well, felt like a punch to the gut. She had always been the strong one. Now she was broken, and it was his heart that had been shattered in the process. Marcus! Emily's voice cracked as she stood, her eyes wide, desperate for some sign of hope. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, he just watched her, his mind swirling with anger, confusion, and hurt. This wasn't just about what she'd done. This was about how everything had unraveled. Everything he had built, the future they had planned, had fallen apart because of her choices. "Do you still love me?" Emily asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Marcus's chest tightened. Love? Could he still love her after everything? The betrayal, the lies, the affair with Rachel. How could he? But the question still lingered, making his heart ache in a way he didn't expect. "I don't know," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "I don't know if I can ever love you the way I did before. You've broken my trust, Emily." Her face crumpled as she reached for him. "Marcus, please don't say that. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I didn't want to hurt you." His eyes narrowed and he took a step back. "A mistake? Emily, this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. You chose Rachel over me, over everything we've built. And now you want me to just forgive you." His voice was cold, like ice, and it hurt even him to hear it. But the words had to be said. He had to make her understand the gravity of what she had done. She stumbled backward, her shoulders shaking as sobs racked her body. "I never wanted this to happen," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you. But I was lost, Marcus. I didn't know who I was anymore. I needed something. Someone." The words stung, but Marcus kept his composure. "I can't fix this, Emily. You need to figure out your own path now. Because I'm done. I'm done trying to fix something that you've broken beyond repair." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she reached out to him again. But Marcus pulled away. He couldn't do this anymore. He couldn't be the one to shoulder all the blame, all the hurt. Not when she was just going to keep tearing him apart. At that moment, Emily's phone buzzed. Marcus's eyes flicked to the screen. Her face froze. A text from Rachel. He could see her hesitate, her thumb hovering over the phone as she fought an inner battle. "Don't," Marcus said flatly. He knew what that text was. He didn't need to see it. But Emily couldn't help herself. She opened the message, her eyes scanning the words quickly. Marcus knew the truth even before she looked up. The way she hesitated, the way her expression faltered. She was still in contact with Rachel, even after everything. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "You've really done it this time, Emily. You're not even trying to hide it anymore." "Marcus," she whispered, pleading. "Please, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I just don't know how to stop. I don't know how to fix what we've become." He took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him. He wasn't angry anymore. He was done being angry. He had a plan, and it was time to execute it. You want to fix this? Here's how, Marcus said, his voice low, but with a strength he hadn't felt before. You leave Rachel. You end it with her. And you leave me alone. If you want a chance to fix anything, it starts with you being honest with yourself. You've already ruined everything with your lies. But maybe, just maybe, you can salvage a piece of your dignity by walking away. Emily's face contorted with confusion and hurt. I don't know if I can do that. Marcus shook his head. I don't care if you can. I'm done asking. It's your choice now. As Marcus turned to leave, Emily didn't stop him. She didn't run after him, didn't beg him to stay. And that was the final sign Marcus needed. She had already made her choice. And now so had he. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. He still had one final piece of the puzzle to complete. There was still Rachel to deal with. The woman who had been his best friend. The woman who had betrayed him just as deeply as Emily. The tension in the air was palpable as Marcus drove to Rachel's apartment. He didn't know what he was going to say, what he was going to do. But one thing was certain. This would be the final confrontation. There would be no more lies, no more manipulation. Just the cold, hard truth. As he pulled up in front of the building, he could see Rachel's silhouette through the window. She was waiting for him, probably thinking she was going to talk her way out of this. But not this time. Folks, stay tuned. Marcus is about to face Rachel, and this is where things are going to get really intense. The pieces are falling into place, and the story is about to reach its boiling point. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. As Marcus walked toward the entrance of Rachel's apartment building, his thoughts were more focused than they'd been in days. The uncertainty, the pain, the confusion, it was all fading. He had a plan now, and everything was about to change. It was time to confront Rachel once and for all. Rachel was waiting for him, sitting on the couch in her dimly lit apartment. She had been staring at her phone, eyes glazed over, clearly nervous about what was to come. She looked up as Marcus stepped into the room, her expression a mixture of relief and dread. She had been expecting him, but nothing could have prepared her for what he was about to say. Marcus, I wasn't sure if you'd show up, she said softly, her voice faltering as she tried to maintain her composure. We need to talk. Marcus didn't waste time. He had waited long enough. No, Rachel, you don't get to control this anymore. His voice was firm, his words cutting through the tension in the room. I came here to end this. I came here to finally make things clear. Everything's been a lie. Rachel looked down, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might crack under the weight of his words. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. It wasn't supposed to be this way, Marcus, she whispered. I never meant to hurt you, but I can't keep living a lie. I've loved you for so long, and I thought maybe it would be different. But then Emily and I... Stop! Marcus held up his hand, stopping her before she could continue. I don't need to hear this anymore, Rachel. I'm not here to fix things. I'm here to move forward. And that starts with you understanding that this ends now. Rachel stared at him, confusion and pain clear in her eyes. What do you mean? Marcus took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing. I mean that I'm done. I'm done with you. I'm done with Emily. I'm done with the lies, the betrayal. It's over. His voice softened, but the words still hit her like a punch. I don't know what you thought we were doing, but you both betrayed me, and it's time I take back control. Rachel sat back, her face pale, as though Marcus's words had just sunk in. He could see her scrambling for a response, but nothing came. What was there left to say? You both have to live with what you've done, Marcus continued. But not with me. I've made my choice. The next few weeks passed in a blur for Marcus. He took time off from work to process everything. The quiet moments, the reflection, it all felt surreal. The intense rush of emotions had worn down to a sharp clarity. He had lost so much, but at the same time he had gained something crucial. His own peace of mind. During that time, Marcus learned a lot about himself. He'd always prided himself on being the kind of person who could hold everything together. Someone who played by the rules, worked hard, and always took care of his responsibilities. But now, he saw how those very principles had made him vulnerable. His blind trust in Emily and Rachel had led to his downfall, but in the process, he had learned the hard lesson of not putting too much trust in people, especially when they had proven themselves unworthy of it. As for Emily, things were different. After their last conversation, she had disappeared from his life. She'd moved out of their shared home, left behind the life they'd built. He had no idea where she went or what she was doing. Part of him wondered if she was still trying to piece her life together. But that was no longer his concern. The months that followed were a mix of painful growth and healing. He focused on work, his company, the things that mattered. He surrounded himself with the people who had never let him down. His loyal employees, his real friends, and most importantly, himself. And in that silence, that solitude, Marcus began to realize that the betrayal wasn't the end for him. It was a beginning to redefine who he was, what he stood for, and where he was going next. The final blow came for Rachel. The consequences of her actions weren't as immediate as they had been for Emily, but they came nonetheless. As Marcus had promised, he made sure Rachel felt the full weight of what she had done. Her reputation, once carefully curated in their professional circles, was now in tatters. The betrayal she had tried to hide came to light in the worst way possible. She lost clients, lost friends, and eventually lost the connections that had made her career so successful. The network of trust that had been built with Marcus, the foundation of their relationship, was gone. And with it, so was her position in the industry. She moved away quietly, retreating from the public eye. It was a sad ending for someone who had once seemed to have it all. But it was the only fitting consequence for the way she had chosen to live her life. As for Marcus, he had rebuilt. His company, once on the brink of collapse due to the scandal, now stood stronger than ever. The lessons he had learned from the betrayal had shaped him into a leader who prioritized integrity above all else. He had instilled that value in his employees and, more importantly, in his children, who had followed his lead and worked hard to prove that they were worthy of the legacy he had built. James and Sarah had learned hard lessons of their own. They had worked their way up through the company, earning their positions on their own merit, rather than relying on their last name. Their respect for their father had grown, and with time they had rebuilt their relationship with him. It wasn't easy, but Marcus knew that they were on the right path now. The final moments of the story come with a sense of closure. As Marcus stands in his newly renovated office, the view of the city skyline stretching out before him, he takes a deep breath, reflecting on everything that has happened. His life, his business, and his family are now on solid ground. And while the scars of the past will never fade completely, they have become the foundation for something stronger, something better. As the camera pulls back, we see Marcus stand tall, a man who has learned that the real power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. This journey, filled with pain and betrayal, has led him to a place of redemption. And it's there, in the quiet of his office, that Marcus finds peace. And with that, folks, we come to the end of this intense journey. Marcus's story is one of pain, growth, and ultimately, redemption. It's a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, we have the power to rise above and rebuild our lives, stronger than before. Thank you for sticking with us through this emotional roller coaster. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we have coming next. Until next time, stay strong and keep pushing forward.